Christopher, I appreciate talking to you, but I want to warn you, you're going down the wrong pathway with that anger.
Well, thanks for the tip.
All right, buddy.
Jews will not replace us!
What just happened?
They maced me.
Who?
I don't know. Communists.
We're here obeying the law. We're doing everything that we're supposed to do, trying to express opinions. And the criminals are over there getting their way. We didn't aggress. We did not initiate force against anybody.
I mean, someone died.
I think that a lot more people are going to die before we're done here, frankly. I contacted the local police. I called the Charlottesville Police Department. I said, I have been told that there's a warrant out for my arrest. We have done everything in our power. We have used every peaceful and lawful means by which to redress our grievances. And our enemies just will not stop. What options do we have left? If somebody would like to inform me of that, then I will be grateful to you. I really will.
Oh, it's the Hake Report, the Hake Report, la la la. Oh, it's the Hake Report, the Hake Report, la la la.
Good morning, everybody. This is James Hake of the Hake Report, and today I have Christopher Cantwell of Radical Agenda. The honor of talking with him, and you can join in too.
The Hake Report, the Hake Report, la la la. Oh, it's the Hake Report, the Hake Report, la la la.
Well, thank you for joining me, everybody. This is the Hake Report, and I have with me a very special guest, Christopher Cantwell. He is host of the Radical Agenda, which is a call-in show, very popular. Probably, I've heard it described as the most entertaining, alt-right-leaning live call-in show and podcast in existence. And I want to talk with him because he was on last summer, the Jesse Lee Peterson show. And you can call into this show with the same number that you call into the Jesse Lee Peterson show, 888-77-JESSE, which is 888-77-53773. And I wanted to talk with Christopher Cantwell because a lot has happened since the last time we talked with him. We talked with him July 31st, 2017, and in August, some crazy things happened. The Unite the Right rally happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Antifa showed up and started causing trouble. And the police seemed to just allow it to happen. And many of the alt-right figures, including Christopher Cantwell and others, were ready for them because they knew how violent that the Antifa people are. And so they attacked back. Christopher Cantwell had some mace or pepper spray, and he was spraying people. And he was charged, I believe, with deploying mace on somebody unprovoked. And we don't know whether that's true or not. And we believe in innocent unless proven guilty. But he went to jail, he turned himself in, and all kinds of crazy things. And you saw some of what happened. He was maced himself. We don't know if that person was charged. I tend to doubt it. Because the media tends to only want to blame the alt-right, which it seems like they want the right or the whites to be angry. They want to make examples of them. They want them fearful and angry. So they either want you shut down or wild. And so I want to talk with Christopher Cantwell. And Christopher, thanks for coming on the show.
It's good to be with you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, is it true that you are on house arrest at this point?
Well, I'm restrained to my city of residence. I'm allowed to leave the house now. For the first couple of months, I wasn't even allowed to take the garbage out, but now I can go buy my own groceries and stuff like that. But I'm confined to the city of residence by a GPS monitor.
And is that because they think that you're a flight risk, or what's going on?
Well, I think it's really difficult in the extreme to suggest that I'm a flight risk. I turn myself in. You know, I'm a public person. I do a radio show 3 days a week. I have a camera in my face, right? Like I literally, there's no place that I could hide if I wanted to, but you know, they pitch it as though I'm some kind of flight risk or menace to society. The prosecutor pretends that, you know, I'm just some rampant criminal who can't control myself. And so for the safety of the community and to make sure that I show up, they tried to keep me in jail. They had me in there for 107 days until 2 of the 3 charges against me were dropped after a preliminary hearing, and then they couldn't keep me in there any longer. So they gave me the most restrictive bond that they could get away with giving me.
You know, I saw on Twitter that Mike Cernovich, who is a very popular figure among the new right, which is not the alt-right, but he kind of stood up for you early on because he said that some of the way that they're treating you is unconstitutional. And I've noticed that they tend to overcharge even the justice system, even though in the end you may get whatever you deserve. During the course of it, they tend to like overcharge people. And I noticed that with the starting with the George Zimmerman case, where George Zimmerman is not even remotely like a white nationalist or a person on the right, really. He voted for Obama, but he happened to kill Trayvon Martin, and it's all indications is it was self-defense. But they charged him with like murder somehow. And so I noticed that people get overcharged. And I want to know this type of, because they came down on you hard, and we saw some indication of like it got to you, like the gravity of how hard they can come down on you got to you. And so I want to know, did they break you, or did they get you even angrier?
Well, I'm damaged, right? I mean, like I've taken a lot of, I've suffered a lot from this, but I'm not broken. I'm still doing my show 3 days a week. They can't shut me up. This is how I was doing the radio show from jail, and the whole entire purpose of this thing is to silence us, right? This was a permitted demonstration, and a bunch of communists decided they were going to start a riot to prevent us from being heard, because they know that if we are heard, people will know that we're right. And so they use violence to prevent us from speaking. That is the defining characteristic of Antifa. That's what makes them Antifa.
Right.
And everybody knows it. And they, and the authorities there are just basically cooperative with the criminal element. So, yeah, they overcharged. That's exactly what happened. The accusation against me is not like there's a picture of me pepper spraying a guy. That's not the guy who's accusing me. Like, I defended myself against that wacko who just participated in a gang assault, and then 2 people who I've never seen before come out of the woodwork and say, when he sprayed that guy, I smelt it, and therefore you attacked me with pepper spray, is literally the accusation against me. And they're charging me with malicious release of gases. Well, I can't maliciously accidentally attack you, you know what I mean? Like it's the accusation against me doesn't even support the charges, much less the evidence. So that's exactly what they're doing, is they're overcharging. I was originally, when the original charge was lodged against me, it was unlawful release of gases, okay? And then the prosecutor heard me make an unkind remark about gender and ethnicity on my radio program, and so he upgraded the charges to malicious. So it goes from a Class 6 felony to a Class 3. I was facing up to 5 years max, and then now I'm facing 40 years max, is what they just upgraded it. They just imputed motive because I say nasty things on the radio is literally what they're doing.
I partially disagree in that their only option is not just to silence you. It's also to PO the people, meaning they want to either silence you or make you, when I say you, the general you, the people who want to stand up for whites or whatever, they want to make you angry and upset and Dylan Roof you, for lack of a better word, meaning Dylan Roof got angry that there was so much black on white crime, and yet the whites were being accused of racism. And so he got mad, and he was already an angry person. He was into drugs and everything wrong, and he didn't have a good family situation. And so he went in and killed those blacks starting in the church, wanting to start a race war. And I've heard some people in the alt-right talk about him for and against, mostly against. But I argue that it's not just to silence, it's also to piss you off, for lack of better word, because that's like the strongest way that I can say it.
The idea is they're driving up the social costs of speaking, okay? And when you drive them up high enough, the only people who will speak are dangerous people.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly what you end up with, and they certainly use that to their advantage, right? I mean, whenever there is anything that they can tie to, white racism, violence, they jump all over it, of course, right? I mean, the school shooter down in Florida, it turned out his mother was a Jew, and they're turning that into white supremacist terrorism, right? Elliot Rodger was not white. They turned that into white supremacist terrorism. They do this all the time. And so, yeah, there's probably a certain component of that they poke the bear, right?
They're
and
trying
then
to provoke.
They use their media apparatus to say, yeah, you white people are a threat to society, which justifies all of our crimes against you.
Yeah. Jesse warned you at the end of that, of his interview with you. He had an interview with you last summer a few weeks before the Unite the Right rally. And I want to know, was he right about the anger thing?
Well, it would appear that way on its face, right? I'm facing 40 years in prison. It's gonna get me in trouble, I think, is what he said, and it certainly had that impact, right?
Yeah.
However, I am driven in part by that anger. All right, I don't like what's happening down here, but I also don't regret what I did, because it's necessary. If these people can stop us by criminal acts of initiatory violence, and that's how they get their way politically, you got to be aware of what kind of incentive that creates in a society. You will have rampant, uncontrolled political violence if that is allowed to prevail.
Right.
And so, in order to prevent that outcome, men must risk their life, limb, and liberty for their race and nation. Otherwise, we will live in a communist just wasteland.
I've noticed that a lot of the alt-right blame Jews for the plight of whites, in addition to white men. In your interview with Jesse, he asked you who's to blame for why whites are under such attack and they're afraid of speaking up, or if they do speak up, they speak up either angrily or just in a way that they're easily marginalized as so-called racist. I want to know, you blamed both white men and Jewish people. If you're sharing the blame, then tell me if I'm wrong. If you're sharing the blame, then you're not going to take full responsibility, and you're not going to encourage others to take full responsibility of their issue, and you're only going to make enemies or you're going to alienate people that could be on your side.
Well, all right, so I'm trying to pick that apart here.
Okay.
In my opinion, white men are basically responsible for everything. Okay, if we've got a problem with the Jews, it's because we allowed the Jews to do things, right? And so, but that doesn't mean that you don't point out Jewish behavior in order to correct the error, right? So I am under the impression, and it's a very well-informed impression, that Jews run the media and financial system, and that's sort of like a salient detail when you're talking about politics. And so, if Jews are running the media and financial system and they're using it to their ethnic interests, white men have to stop them. And if we don't, then it's our fault.
And do you think that the best way to stop them is to speak out against them like that?
I think it would be best not to let them into your country, frankly, and then you don't have to worry about speaking out against them quite so much. But once they're there, yes, you have to step up and you have to say that they're using this for their ethnic interests. Jews are always screaming about racism at everybody else. It's a projection that they hurl on to their enemies. They are not a religious group. They are a race. They view themselves as a race, and they compete as a race against other races. And they are absolutely hostile towards their competitors. And that is the definition of racism. And they made race a religion is what the Jews did. And they control everything to their ethnic interests at the expense of others. And them calling everybody else a racist is them telling all these other people not to compete as a race. And it's just a low down, dirty tactic.
I think that President Trump's way is better in that he works with people. I don't think that he sees the issue that you do, but he works with people, and he'll work with his enemies. He'll work with Democrats. He'll work with Jews. He'll work with Christians. He'll work with anybody. And I think that that's smarter in a way in that you have to work in the world and you have to function and work with people, especially in the situation where America is. America got this idea that diversity was great and that white people are racist. And now we live in this world where that's people's perception, that's people's reality. And now we have to function in this world, so we have to kind of cooperate with that situation. Where you can't criticize Jewish people lest you look like you're anti-Semitic, and in a sense, many of the white nationalists do legitimately hate these Jewish people, and you
understandably, they're angry and they have really good reason to be, and that's the point, right? Look, I'm all for working with people, but when people are not communicating honestly, it's not an honest negotiation. Okay, so this perception of white people are racist and violent and evil, that is a Jewish plot. That's literally what that is. And it ends up becoming the case because we are antagonized, as you pointed out earlier, right? Mm-hmm. So they've done this on purpose, and then it happens, and then they complain about it. That's not, you can't work with people who are behaving in a dishonorable fashion, and therein the problem lies. If everybody was just communicating honestly, and this was, a negotiation of sorts, if this was an honest attempt to work together, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
But you cannot expect the world is a dishonest place, and people who rise to the top are many times the worst among them because power tends to corrupt. And so we live in a reality where we know that people are dishonest, and we know that racism is not a real thing. It's not a real issue. And you said that Jews are racist, but they're not. They're just, there's decent ones and indecent ones. And most people, period, are evil. And so to me, it's much more useful to cast it as good versus evil as opposed to pro-white versus anti-white, because the world is anti-white. And part of the reason is because more than half of whites, especially white men, vote correctly, vote for sanity, for the rule of law, justice, freedom. And more than half of every other group votes totally against that. And so you have to cast it as a right versus wrong thing, because that's so much more useful and clear. Because if it's just pro-white versus anti-white, then Dylan Roof wasn't wrong for doing what he did.
That doesn't necessarily follow at all. No, going into a church and shooting a bunch of people is a waste of your own life. On top of the horrors that follow and the pain that you inflict on others, it's a waste of your life. If you are interested in the survival of your race and nation, then being able to participate in its salvation is sort of important. And so I can say, even if this is not the way I view it, but even if I just viewed those people in that church as animals to be slaughtered, even if I saw it that way, which I don't, mm-hmm. I would still say Dylan Roof made a very tragic mistake at best, that he threw his life away and did not do the best that he could do for his race and nation. Okay, putting things in racial terms helps clarify things, and that's why the left does it. Okay, if the left and the media, the Jews, did not think race was a useful tool politically, then they wouldn't constantly be race baiting. Okay, race is the single most salient detail in all of our political discussions, and we're all terrified to mention it because the Jews will come after us in the media. If not for that fact, we would have solved this problem already.
I noticed that. Let's see. The left doesn't use race to clarify things. You know that is not true. They are using race to lie.
Yeah.
Now it's good and fine to point out that, for example, what I did, like that white men particularly know how to vote and know how to preserve freedom, or at least they vote in ways that preserve freedom, I think. They're more justice-oriented, freedom-oriented, and all that. But I think that what you said about anger being justified, it kind of is, but it also puts you in situations that you could avoid. And now, Dylan Roof, you're right in that tactically, even if you are of the opinion of white versus anti-white, that Dylan Roof's thing did not work. But your situation could possibly have been better had you done everything that you did except without the anger. For example, I mean, maybe you went off a little bit further than you needed to, and then you could be still like a free man today.
Well, don't get me wrong. It's fine to point out that my anger has probably gotten me in trouble more than a few times, okay? But the truth of the matter is, and anybody who wants to watch this video can see it, what I did was absolutely very controlled, okay? This guy participated in a gang assault right next to me. And then he got up, he looked at me, he cocked his hand back, and I sprayed him in the face with pepper spray. And then all hell broke loose, okay? And that wasn't my doing. I went to go have a peaceful demonstration that I said I would not participate in unless the cops were there. And then the cops just didn't show up, right? The cops agreed to protect us from terrorists, and then they didn't. That's literally what happened. And so I pepper sprayed a guy, for the first time I've ever used pepper spray. If don't get me wrong, I'm angry about a lot of subjects, and I do an angry racist podcast, but if I wanted violence, I'd have it every single day. People want to hurt me, right? So it's not difficult for me to get myself in trouble, but I'm not out there attacking people. My anger makes the radical agenda an exceedingly entertaining production. It makes me motivated to go out and defeat my enemies, and not just in the sense of a violent conflict, but to defeat them in terms of propaganda, to defeat them in terms of argument, to defeat them in terms of resource and reproductive success. I mean, this is I'm driven by, in a lot of ways, an utter contempt for the degeneracy that runs rampant in this society, and I want to stop it, and it's a motivating factor, and I like it.
I don't think that your anger is what necessarily makes your podcast or your show entertaining. I think it's your talent. I mean, you have a natural talent for speaking very well, putting together, like these clips, these creative stuff, and you get very interesting information. So I don't think that it's your anger that is. I wouldn't hold on to that as for fear of losing your value to the world. Now I have a caller, and I'm going to come to the caller.
Okay.
Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Patrick, I'm calling from the South.
Hey, Patrick, how's it going?
Hey, hi, hello, your guest.
Hi there.
I want to talk about what you call the Jews, quote unquote. I think that talking about a group of people in a fashion of basically broad brushing them as just evil people intent on taking over the world is too broad brushing. Of course, there's some Jews, quote unquote, that are into that. But I think what you're looking at in reality is a group of people as a whole who are extremely talented, who have just a lot going for them in terms of their brains, their creativity, and they're amazing people. I mean, I've been to Israel. It's an amazing, beautiful place, and there's beautiful people there. So I just think it's outrageously wrong to just broad brush a group of people as being some kind of evil force. And I think that helps people who don't know any better to get them angry so that it cause them to do things against Jewish people. And that's just wrong.
Well, I can see why you would feel that way. We've basically been programmed with that type of nonsense our entire lives. But here's the fact of the matter.
What do you mean by nonsense? What
do you mean by putting Jews in quotes, right? Look, the fact of the matter is that, like, when you're dealing with political discussions, you have to start dealing with groups. We talk about the Republican Party. We talk about the Democrat Party. We talk about this pack. We talk about that pack, right? Jews vote Democrat 70% of the time, and they have the intellect to know better. Okay. And so that tells you something about what the influence that they're having on your society. And it's also kind of worth pointing out. You mentioned Israel. You know, the policies that they propose in their host countries in the diaspora, they don't propose those things in Israel. Israel sounds like a great testing ground for open borders immigration policy to most Nazis. But surprisingly enough, the Jews seem to disagree. Why don't they go try some of this in their home countries? They don't do it because they're not trying to destroy the place.
Well, you're talking about, you said 70% vote for Democrats, and they do, and that's really crazy that they do. But that means 30% are not voting for Democrats. So what about those people? I mean, when you broad brush the Jews as one entity, they're not one entity. They're a people of many different beliefs.
Okay. But if I'm trying to eliminate the leftist scourge from my society and the intelligentsia of the left is the Jews, well, that's sort of like a salient detail when you're trying to figure out a political problem. Okay. And I'm not saying
you're going to cause problems against people who are innocent of what you're claiming,
which is the
exact broad brushing a whole group of people.
Which is exactly what's going to happen if the Democrats are left unopposed in this country, which is exactly what's going to happen if we don't get that wall built and start shipping people out of here. OK, the white people are set to lose their majority in this country. It's probably already happened, frankly, because they don't keep good statistics on these things. OK, and that means that we're never going to have another Republican president. That means that the left is going to be completely able to run rampant and that there's going to be nothing to stop them. And if you think innocent people are going to get hurt with what I'm proposing, well, just you wait and see what happens when the country falls to communism and we go through the Soviet Union all over again here.
But that's a false dilemma That's a false dilemma in that there are other smarter maybe ways to fight than to simply roll over and let the Democrats win and let the attacks on whites continue. You can still fight it. I mean, look at President Trump. He's fighting it to a certain extent. I think you agree, and he hasn't ever attacked Jews.
Wow, that would be difficult in the extreme since all of his children married Jews. I understand that would make his family life rather difficult. However,
but he's effective. I mean, he's more effective than you or me or anybody.
Well, he's more effective in getting political power, but how effective has he seriously been in wielding it, right? If Donald Trump got everything he wanted on immigration, you know what that would delay the white minority by 5 years, okay? 5 years it would buy us if he got everything that he wanted, and he hasn't even. And there's no wall built. There's not this, huge deportation forces shipping everybody out. You've got illegal immigrants blocking the entrance of Disneyland, and screaming that they shouldn't be, that they should have all the rights and free health care, et cetera, et cetera. That's literally, he's such an authoritarian dictator that people want him to come take their guns away, and they break the law in the streets,
Hey,
this is seriously what we're facing.
Can we come back to a point? It's Christopher, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Christopher, can we come back to a point that James made earlier? It was a great point. The thing is, people are if we look at people as individuals, it makes a lot more sense. For instance, I agree with you on probably a whole lot of things. James agrees with you on a whole lot of things. There's a lot of sense there of what you're talking about. most of what you say makes perfect sense. But when you throw that anger into it, it throws the whole thing out of kilter. It makes you start broad brushing groups of people that is totally unnecessary. No. All we have to do is come together for the right things. And those people could be Jews that come with us. They could be black. They could be Hispanic. They could be Asian. They could be even Democrats, possibly. All you want is all I want. I think we all should agree is people to come together for the right things, to close the borders, do all the right things for the country, no matter who they are, and we'll have a great country. But if we don't do that and we start breaking ourselves off against each other, we're just going to have we're going to have chaos, and that's what the media wants.
Well, we have chaos, right? Like the chaos has ensued. I'm facing 40 years in prison for defending myself, right? So like the chaos is already here, fella. And if you want to bring order to it, I'll tell you what racial group has throughout history sort of been kind of keen on the law and order thing, and that's white people. All right. And what happens is, and when we allow our country to go to other people, then the order ceases. And so if we don't take the demographics into consideration, if we don't start paying attention to who's causing the problems, then the problems are going to get out of hand.
No, I understand the demographics issue. That's why the left has been bringing in people from all these different places. But primarily the people they're bringing in, it's not the color of their skin or their religion. It's their culturalness. It's their lack of morality. They're bringing people in who have no character, who have no values. And that's what's destroying our country.
Christopher, are you getting other races agreeing with you? Because as you alluded, the whites are basically like a minority already, right? And so are you getting other people to your side?
Yeah, I just shipped a copy of Mein Kampf to Jerusalem, actually. I'm dead serious. I'm not even kidding you. Yeah, I'm dead serious. I have Jews call into the radical agenda on a pretty regular basis. Some of them agree with me, some of them don't. You know, I definitely have. There's some Cuban guys, some mulattoes. I mean, you know, I've got a black or two fan, right? Like these, well, there are people.
You're sending Mein Kampf. So Mein Kampf, written by Adolf Hitler, you're looking at as like a great work. I mean, you see what happened, what Adolf Hitler did and what happened to him, right?
Well, I think it's a book worth reading, right? Like, even if you think that Adolf Hitler was the worst guy to ever live, it's sort of like a salient detail to know what he was talking about, right?
Yeah, I don't mind hearing what he has to say, but why would you ship it to them? What's the purpose of shipping it to them?
Somebody requested it?
Because the guy paid me for it. I sold it to him.
Oh, I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
I sell the book on my website.
So are you reading and sending Adolf Hitler material to people so they can be educated in some broad way, or because you like the ideas that are in the book?
Well, I think that some of the ideas in the book are really good, actually. Yeah, I think it's a book worth reading, and I actually think it's really good work of literature, by the way. And so I can't recommend Mein Kampf highly enough, and I think the Jews, most of all, should probably read it because they seem to put an awful lot of effort into making a big deal about the Holocaust, and nobody bothered to check the source material. It's staggering, right? It's like everybody thinks that this is like the most important thing that ever happened, and nobody ever bothered to read the book of the guy who allegedly did it. It's staggeringly irresponsible.
Are you saying it didn't happen?
I wasn't there.
You said that
there's historical evidence for it.
I think that you'll find that the historical evidence that's purported is sort of lacking. Okay, this is something that's pushed on us. All right, now it's entirely possible. If you read Mein Kampf, Hitler was definitely mad at the Jews, right? And but just hang on a second. Listen to me, okay? So if you read Mein Kampf, Hitler was definitely really, really mad at the Jews, and he had a lot of really good reasons to be. And so it's not outside the realm of possibility that a guy who formed an authoritarian government decided to kill a bunch of people. But here's sort of the thing about the Holocaust, right? Like even if you accept it on face value that Hitler woke up on the wrong side of the bed one morning and murdered 6 million Jews for no reason at all, well, even if that's true, That's like they're not the number one racial group that died in World War II, as a matter of fact. So why are we always obsessed about the Holocaust for the Jews? It's always about the Jews. The Jews, the Jews, Jews. What I know about Jews is that they lie fanatically, and that and lying about the Holocaust is something that I would absolutely not put past them as a racial group. It would make perfect sense to me that they did that. But it would also make perfect sense to me that Hitler killed 6 million of them. I don't know which one is the case.
And that's amazing. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, you kind of like make the point that I'm making, which is you're just saying the Jews are this, the Jews are that. The Jews are just certain people. They're people who are good or they're bad. I don't know why you can't see the difference between that.
Christopher,
I'm not failing to understand something here. We're disagreeing with one another.
No, you're failing to understand that the Jews make up a whole bunch of people, many of whom are corrupt, just like most of all humanity is corrupt at this point, and many of them are good.
Well, that might well be the case, right? But if there is a reason that Jews have earned a reputation as a racial group. You know, do you think that like stereotypes exist for no reason? Like people think of blacks in crime, and that association like sticks out in people's minds. It doesn't mean that Jesse Lee Peterson is a violent criminal, but it's a pretty good heuristic to understand the problems in your society.
The reason that Jews have done so well is because, in my opinion, they're God's chosen people to start with, and therefore they have just had some type of special relationship with God, and they've been very, very talented people. Now, that talent has gone for good in many cases. They've helped eradicate diseases. They've done amazing things in many walks of life, but they've also become leaders of communists, like, what was it, Marx, I guess, was a Jew. And they've done a lot of bad things as well. But there just happen to be very talented people who go in one direction or the other based on the inclination of their heart.
Okay, so they're God's chosen people, and they brought us communism. All right, thanks. That makes a lot of sense.
No, I didn't say they brought us communism. They Jew brought communism, but a Jew also helped eradicate diseases. So, I mean, it depends on which Jew you're talking about.
I mean,
the case has never been made that Jews are incapable of providing value to a society. That's not the case being made. The problem is that they are a necessary component of the leftist uprisings that are destroying humanity. Okay, look into the Bolshevik Revolution. You know, Trotsky was a Jew. The whole Bolshevik Revolution was a Jewish thing. Look into neoconservatism. Who's destroying the Republican Party? Jews. And it's impossible not to notice this when you start paying attention to it. And so if they were not in the political equation, we would not have these problems. And so if you want to solve these problems, you don't let Jews into your political system. And that's literally the solution to the problem. And it doesn't mean that they are incapable of doing good. Right? Like, fine. They make do medicine.
But that ship has sailed. That ship has sailed. Like they're here. Many of them are in charge, and so you're not going to win that battle.
Well, that's not true, right? Like that battle can be won. If white men decide Jews get out, then the Jews leave. It's that simple.
Okay,
right?
But you have to. But at that point, whites have to stand for what's right. You have to do the right thing, and you cannot.
And the right thing is to get rid of the Jews.
You said that 70% of Jewish people vote Democrat, and they're smarter than that. But it's not purely about smartness. I think that you guys, meaning the alt-right, have a preoccupation with IQ as opposed to right and wrong. And I do see that you guys notice degeneracy and you oppose degeneracy, which I appreciate. But it's not just about smartness, because if it was, then you would be glad to let Jewish people run things because they are, on average, smarter than the rest of us.
No, it's not. It's not all about IQ, you know. So
it's about right and wrong.
I'm not an IQ nationalist, right? I'm a white nationalist. All right. I do not believe that I should be compelled to share a system of government with ethnic groups that have interests that are diametrically opposed to my own. It's the most common sense political policy that you could ever have.
But you're born into the world that's in this situation.
Well, the world. I was born into a country that turned the immigration flood on in 1965. Right. Like, that's not that old of a policy. Those policies can change. All right. And the other thing about it is, I don't particularly think that the United States can stand politically, geopolitically anymore. I think that even if you take race out of it, half the country is terrified and loathsome of the other half on party alone.
Right.
When you add race to the mix, we are so divided. All of this diversity is our strength nonsense has hammered home the point that what makes a country strong is unity, not division. And now we have so much of it that I don't think it is possible for the United States to last another century under a contiguous system of government. I believe that secession is necessary. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to redraw political lines, doing them with ethnicity in mind is the only responsible policy.
So, Christopher, you point out what you want to do. So you want to take, I guess, white people, and you want to basically push Jews out of the country, and I guess other ethnic groups too, blacks and other ethnic groups. Is that right?
Out of a particular region. Again, I don't think the United States is like 60% white if you believe the statistics, and I don't, right? So it's impossible. We can't ethnically cleanse North America. It's not a practical policy, even if you found it desirable, and I don't. But I don't. Say New Hampshire and Maine. Okay, do that, right? You secede these two states, and they become an independent nation. And yes, you say, okay, everybody, this is the white ethno state, and everybody else has got to kind of go. Maybe we'll pay for your plane ticket, we'll buy your house, whatever the policy might be. You ask them to go. Now, if people don't want to comply with your request, that can get ugly. But that's what happens when people break the law, right?
So let me ask a question then. So if you want to put certain states, and this state is for this group, and this state's for that group, where is the United States, and what would cause the states to want to band together as a country if that was to happen?
Again, I don't think that we are at a point in our history that we can continue as a contiguous system of government. We don't share a common. We don't even share a common language anymore. I mean, it's like we're not the same race. We don't share the same language. We don't have the same political ideas. And we have a two-party system that's supposed to control all of the decisions with an omnipotent federal government that micromanages every aspect of the human condition. And we're all supposed to just figure this out. It's not going to work. It's impossible.
Okay.
He's given up on America.
Look, I'd like to keep this country personally because I love America. What about this? How about just we take the states with the most freedoms and let the people go to those states who love freedom, and the ones that want to be socialist hellholes, we let the socialist people go there. And that's kind of already happening, by the way. You realize that, right?
What you're talking about is a radical change of policy, right? So if we're going to radically change policy, like your radical change and my radical change, I'm perfectly happy to see that happen. Okay, if you want to do it that way, fine. When you're redrawing lines, let me go redraw some over here and do it based on ethnicity, and then everybody gets what they want.
I'm saying
we've got a really big piece of land here.
Then, if we base it on character and principle and behavior, that's the American way, not based on just separating all the races out. That's never going to. There's never going to be a United States that way.
Well, no, there isn't. We just established that, right? So, like, the United States you can't have a United States and diversity. It's just impossible. Diversity plus proximity equals conflict. Now we have all of the diversity in the world. Whites are about to become a minority in their own country, and we're going to be ruled by blacks and Jews. That's what your country is going to be like real soon, okay? So if you think that's a desirable outcome, then by all means, after I get done redrawing the lines, you stay on the other side of the border, and you can see how that pans out for you, pal. I'm not looking forward to it.
Parting shot, I'll let you guys go. Thank you. Great show, James, by the way. But to me, again, and I'm going to reiterate what you said earlier in the show, James, the only way I see of making this country work again and having any shot at all is to allow it to be based on character. And we have to come together on what's right. We have to shut the borders. I agree with that. There's a lot of things we have to do, but we have to come together on what's right. I don't see any other way for a future of this country than to do it on what's right and not based on someone's religion or race. It's just going to cause total havoc.
All right. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, man.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Patrick.
So, were you raised Christian?
My mother did her best.
Did you have your father too?
Yeah. My father was around. He was not particularly into the religion thing, but mom tried to raise us as good Catholic boys.
Yeah, and the mainstream media, MSM as they call them, referred to you as the crying Nazi.
Yep.
How did you handle that?
Well, look, we just got done talking about Jews running the media, right? And so I'm not surprised that they throw unflattering terms at people who are anti-Semites. It's true that I got emotional after I'd been pepper sprayed twice in 2 days and found out that cops were looking for me.
Yeah.
That happened. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not a Nazi. I've said it a million times that I'll convert to Islam before I call myself a socialist, and not because I want to pray 5 times a day. Okay, but that's what they do, right? Everybody who opposes them is a Nazi, and that's just another stupid smear tactic that these people have been using ever since Nazis.
You started out as like a libertarian. You earlier in life, and you were correct me if I'm wrong. You were more kind of like an. You referred to yourself on Jesse's show as a minarchist, which is minimum government. Is that right?
No. So I for a period of time, and to an extent I still do, but I liked the term anarcho-capitalist for a long time. Okay. And what I said on Jesse's show, he kept on asking me if I was an anarchist, and what I said was it might make more sense to say that I'm a monarchist.
Oh, monarchist. Okay.
Because in my view, the leftists are not wrong when they say that the government protects the poor from the rich or whatever, okay? If you didn't have government intervention, what you would have is elites would basically end up owning all of the property, and they would dictate to others, all right? And so it would be, in my estimation, a very authoritarian system, and I actually like that idea. So I don't think that people think of property lines as these really neatly zoned things or whatever, and I don't think that would exist for very long. If somebody's not subject to taxes in their ownership of land, they're more or less welcome to begin collecting them, and that's a really huge reward. And so a lot more resources are going to be aimed at that than the average person is going to be able to come up with, and so you would basically have sort of feudalism, if you will. And I don't think that's wrong. I think that the more capable people, they acquire resources and they meter them out according to their interests, and that works for the society. So I believe that you should basically have. Basically, I think that democracy was a bad idea. We had a lot better system under kings.
Okay, so you're a white nationalist, but more of a not so anti-socialist.
Yeah, I don't think think that welfare statism provides good incentives, right? If you want to have,
right.
I'm sort of a eugenicist. I want to have good people around me, right? And breeding matters, okay? Well, if you just give people cash to drop babies on the floor all day, then you're going to end up with a lot of really low quality people in your society. And so I think the free market is a peaceful eugenics program, and the only thing that you really need to do is restrict immigration for the most part. And as long as you just have some responsible policies around who the people are, what the people do solves itself.
So are you an atheist today?
I don't think that. I guess strictly speaking, that would be accurate. I don't like that term because I find I find it has a really negative connotation in terms of how they deal with religion. I view religion very positively. I just can't honestly claim to have faith in the supernatural.
Okay. And you guys can call in 888-775-3773, 888-77-JESSE. We have about 10 minutes to go. I wanted to ask a few more things. I wanted to press you on. You say that this anger is justified, and I can see why you say that, because nothing makes whites and men and decent people who have anger more angry than injustice, lies, and stuff like that. But I question whether it is justified, because it only causes ill. like you abandon wisdom when you have the anger. So react.
I disagree. I don't think. Look, don't get me wrong. There may be some people who allow their anger to get the best of them. That probably happens entirely too frequently. But I don't believe that it causes people to abandon wisdom. I mean, look, would you agree with me that war is occasionally necessary?
Yes.
Okay. When you have war, you would probably be better if your soldiers really didn't like the enemy, right? It was kind of like an important factor. And so it's a necessary element in a society that when the society becomes corrupted, the men of the society should become angry about it. And if they don't, then they won't solve the problem.
But I mean, somebody like Jesse, take Jesse, or look at President Trump. Those guys, they fight back, and they're not. I mean, Trump says occasionally that he's angry, but he doesn't come off as angry. And so I kind of question and Jesse says he has no anger, and yet he's a pretty effective fighter, I would say. He's not as effective as, say, President Trump, which you question whether he's effective at all, except for to gain the power. And I know that it looks like, because he is the world is opposed to him. But I think that you don't have to have anger or hate to fight against evil.
But you asked me about the religion question earlier. Are you a Christian man?
Yeah.
Doesn't the Bible tell you to hate that which is evil?
It may, but it's not the kind of hate that's that you and I have. That's where we're emotional about it. Because if you're, like even to culturally appropriate, in like kung fu type stuff, they say to be a little bit removed so that they can't get under your skin, make you angry, make you afraid, all of that. Does that make sense?
Perhaps, and maybe that's good advice. I think I am of the opinion, and I guess we don't see eye to eye on it, but it is a motivating factor. And the other component of it is, look, you and I as smart people, all right, we can think things through and do it intellectually. For a lot of people in our society, that's just not going to be the option. All right. On the race and IQ thing, whites are all over the spectrum in terms of inclinations and aptitudes. And the men who are not at the high end of our intellectual spectrum are no less important to our society, and they are more guided by emotions than they are by intellect. And there's nothing wrong with that. So when they sense an injustice, even if they can't articulate it in the manner that you and I can, they'll be upset by it. And that emotional reaction to it is very, very important. They will, even if all they do is vote based on it, it is how they know that something's wrong.
All right. We have a caller. Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Bible Go-To Guy, Los Angeles.
Hey, Bible Go-To Guy.
Hey, what's going on, James? I really like your guest. He sounds like a smart man, but I need to ask him one question.
Thanks, pal. What's up?
Actually, two questions. I'm sorry. Do you love white people?
Well, not all of them, no.
Do you love the Jews?
No.
Not all of them, or just not any of them?
Well, as a racial group, if to get back to broad brushing,
you didn't do all that with the whites. You just said with the whites, you said not all of them, but with the Jews, you just said no. And then I asked you, in case that was a mistake, to kind of clarify it.
So
now, do you love the Jews?
I am saying that here. Let me try to clarify. Okay, I am interested in excluding Jews from my life, from my sphere of influence. I want Jews excluded. Period. Point blank.
That's not the question.
Well,
do you love the Jews?
I don't.
Okay, so my conclusion is, I want you to, kind of mull on this after you get off the show, is that if you don't love your enemies, you don't love anybody.
That's really cute. I don't know how else to respond to it.
That's really true, actually. It's really true. Because love doesn't react with hate and anger toward anybody, their enemies, their friends. Because your friends can actually be your worst enemy. You know this by living through life. That a lot of times your enemies will tell you the truth before your friends will. They'll tell you in anger to hurt you, but they'll at least tell you the truth. You see, so that's why you can't be angry or hating on anybody, because your friends and your enemies, it's all the same as concerning love. There's no difference.
Yeah, no, there's a pretty big difference there. I'd go so far as to say. Now, I'd be
Not
the
that
first
you don't
one to
correct
admit
your enemies.
that you
Not
could
that you
be
don't correct
dragged
your
down
enemies,
by
you
your
just
friends,
don't-
no
you
question
just
about
don't
it.
hate them.
That's why it's really important to have good friends. That's why it's really important to be very selective about who you love, right? But it doesn't mean that your friends and your enemies are the same thing. You should have the same emotional reaction to them. That's insane.
But like I heard, listen, and this makes great sense to me. Like I heard from Jesse Peterson, and it makes great sense to me, is that your friends, when they get angry, can turn on you in a heartbeat. And that's why anger is a fool's choice for life, as an emotion. That's why emotion itself, which is all fueled by anger, is a foolish thing to be involved with. And that's why you have to, live life more like that fantasy figure Spock, where he was unemotional and he just handled things logically. And that's the way love works. It doesn't work, because it gets upset and now I got motivation to do something. That stuff doesn't last, and
love
destroys
is
your life,
emotionless like
actually.
Spock.
Yeah, he said love has no emotion, kind of like Spock.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I bet your wife loves you very much. It must be a really happy house that you live in. I can't imagine living like that. That frightens me.
Well, when you live emotionally, you're living like her. That's why she likes you, because you're weak, but she doesn't really like you. She wants you to be not like her and to be unemotional so that she can get over her emotion. You see, that's the way it really works. Not where you're two emotional women in a marriage, and that's not going to work.
Well,
might as well both be
agree.
gay.
I agree that men need to be in control of their emotions, and occasionally you have to behave like a psychopath. I understand that, all right? I agree with you. That's an important part of the masculine feature, right? But I'll tell you what, when I'm in a relationship with a woman, I ain't nothing like Spock. My logic goes right out the damn window, and I go crazy for them, and I'll do anything for them, and if we didn't, what would be the point? Why would we sacrifice so much for them if we were thinking this through? It's like my financial gain and
We're not
my
really,
ability to have.
That's an ego. That's an ego thing. We're not really sacrificing for them. We're sacrificing for our own ego, is what it is. Because if we really loved them, we wouldn't be acting all out of sorts like that. You're not helping a woman when you fall all over the place for them. That just pumps them up and makes them want to abuse you and then drop you and move on to the next one.
Well, that'll happen from time to time. There's no question about that. They'll take advantage of it, right? And that's why
but they'll never leave an alpha male.
That's why when approaching them, you gotta play a little bit of a game, right? You can't let them know how much you like them.
It can't be a game for you. It has to be real for you, because they'll see through the game eventually. You will show your hand eventually, and then they'll just run all over it.
Oh, I don't want to live like a psychopath, friend. It's something that is rewarding to me. I like having feelings and stuff, and I understand that there's a lot of arguments to be made against it, but you and I are not going to see eye to eye on this one, fella.
Are you an alpha male or a beta male, Christopher?
I'm an alpha male, of course.
Not when it comes to women.
Not when it comes to women, he said.
The guy listened to me for 20 minutes. He thinks I know how I'm women.
He heard your last interview, too.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Bible Go-To Guy. Take care.
All right, thanks. Bye.
So this reminds me of the point that he brought up about loving your enemy. That's in the Bible, right? So to hate evil is not to hate your enemy. So he makes a point in that it's not personal. And that's kind of an important point, because then you are able to smack them down and then have lunch with them if you have to, kind of like what Trump did with Romney and so many others. I think that it's...
But shouldn't we're supposed to hate what is evil, and you say, but not our enemies. Who is our enemy if not evil?
Evil is what is the enemy, but it's not who, because the human beings are just like either a vessel of good or evil.
Okay.
So I don't think that you should even like hate the George Soros or any other wicked person who happens to be a Jew. I think that you should, and this is something that both the alt-right and the alt-right and everybody else has an issue with. You guys name it as Jews. We name it as the liberal media, and other people name it as white racists. But they're all hating, but it's not, they think that they're hating evil, but they're hating people.
Well, have you ever noticed that when people call out the media, occasionally they'll be accused of anti-Semitism just for saying that?
Yeah,
right?
or if they call out the globalists, that has become like a racial slur.
There was a piece in Forbes, and he was talking about shutting down all cryptocurrencies, so like Bitcoin and whatnot, right? And he's well. Anyway, I'm not doing this justice. At some point in this thing, he says, when people talk about the banks, they're dog whistling about the Jews. It's a Jewish writer who says this, right? When people are talking about the banks, they're talking about the Jews, right? Okay, like why don't I just agree with this Jewish writer? You know what I mean? Well, if we say the banks and the media are ruining everything, we just call them Jews, and then everybody understands it better, right? If everybody did that, then Jews would probably behave better, frankly, and maybe we wouldn't have these problems. But like, you know, it's a way of understanding the world, and it actually makes more sense than when you try to do things in this, you know, atomized, hyper individualistic fashion. Because really, when you do, you know, there comes a point in your individualism when you really become the ultimate collectivist. Because what you're really doing is saying that, you know, all of mankind is one, right? Well, if you can't identify groups, then it becomes impossible to do anything. Like, pattern recognition is a feature of the human mind for a reason, and we wouldn't survive without it. You know, you have to be able to tell who's who. And if you can't tell the difference between white and black, you're going to have a very difficult time telling the difference between Chris and Jamal.
So I get what you're saying, but I mean, this is part of what I'm saying is in order to get along in the world, I don't think that you're going to convince everybody to start calling Jews out. It's that ship has sailed a long time ago. They're, you know, what they say, I think Voltaire said, find out who rules over you by finding out who you can't criticize. But accept it, because they do. And so you should just start behaving right.
Take it.
Play along.
Lay down and
play the
take
game
it,
like
man.
play the game like Trump did.
They're going to rule you until the end of time. Just take it.
Yes. Because then you know how to, that's what I'm saying is like, learn how to fight in the right way. Well, anyways, I wish you well, Chris, for Cantwell.
Likewise, friend.
All right, take care. Thank you, guys. Tune into Church with Jesse Lee Peterson in 1 hour.